Hi everyone, this is Eden of LightCycleAstrology.com. Welcome back to the channel and happy Monday. Today I am very excited to take a look at the astrology for this coming week ahead. This is Mantic Monday, episode number 40. This week has some incredibly exquisite astrology that we'll be taking a look at. The thing that we're going to focus in on today is going to be the Mercury-Venus conjunction that forms at the very first degree of Cancer this week, being hosted by a moon in Scorpio. But also we have the Summer Solstice where the sun enters the sign of Cancer, and at the end of the week we have a Capricorn full moon. Now that is way too much for us to deeply look at in one Mantic Monday video, but we'll go through the sequence timing of these things, and then we'll dive into more depth on the Mercury-Venus conjunction, the archetypal narratives that may come along that have to do with Mercury and Venus essentially becoming married in this very sensitive feminine lunar sign such as Cancer, while the moon is in fall. So that's a really interesting and powerful moment for us this week. Before we get into it, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit notifications so you don't miss any videos. Leave some comments in the comment section. You can always find me at lightcycleastrology.com if you want to find out about client readings that I offer there. Okay, well, let's pull up the real-time clock, and I want to spend just a few moments to go through the times and sequences of planetary movements, because this is where we derive our powers to interpret the meaning. So we'll spend some time on this sequence today, just a little bit, which is, in my opinion, very exquisite. Now, the first thing that happens for us this week is we have on Monday at 6:20 a.m. GMT time, we have Venus becoming the first planet to enter Cancer this solar year. So we haven't had any planets go through the sign of Cancer this year. And now, well, except for the moon, of course, which goes around the zodiac one time a month. But so we're getting a changeover of planets entering this very amazing place in the zodiac. The ancient astrologers said that this first degree of Cancer was called the gateway of man. And we'll get into that more in our video here. But we have Venus crossing over the gateway of man, 6:20 a.m. GMT time. And then 18 minutes after that, this is really, really cool. The moon entering the sign of Scorpio 18 minutes later. Now, why is this important? Well, it's because from the standpoint of ancient astrology, we always take a look at what condition the host lord is in if we want to understand how planets are expressing themselves in particular signs. So we have Venus in the moon's sign. What kind of condition is the moon in at that time? It's rather like if you go over to somebody's house and you're a guest in their house. Are they in a good mood? Are they in a bad mood? You know, are they having times of good fortune in which you share that good fortune, or are they sort of going through like down on their luck kind of a thing? It's always really important to understand what is happening with planets in signs that are not their own. How are they being treated? What are the kinds of resources that are provided to them by the host lord? So that is something that is a way of interpreting what Venus is going to be able to do in the sign of Cancer, at least initially, as the moon is in Scorpio. Now, what is so amazing, though, is that the moon is forming a perfected immediate trine to Venus, meaning they form a trine together, and it is the angle is precise exactly at the moment that the moon enters Scorpio. For me, because the precision is so immediate, I get the feeling that it is speaking to an event that is very specific. Sometimes when you get planets in signs and their host is in a sign that is visible to that sign, there's a broader there's a broader form of support that is informing or providing resources. But in this particular case, because the changeover happens and then there is an immediate degree-based perfected trine between host lord and guest, I feel that this is an omen for something event-based specific, whether that is an event that happens on the internal landscapes or whether it's a tangible worldly event that happens out there in the world. I believe that this week we will get some very specific event-based things that are concrete or tangible, which is very apropos for planets entering Cancer, the sign of the moon, because the moon represented in ancient astrology the worldly incarnated form. We'll talk more about that here in a second, but let's move the real time clock forward 3 hours later. 3 hours later, we get Mercury then entering Cancer. And now this is the beginning of the formation of the conjunction between Mercury and Venus, because now they're both in the same sign. So they're very, very close at this point already 3 hours later. And then 3 hours after Mercury enters the sign of Cancer, they perfect their conjunction with one another. So we'll roll the real-time clock forward 3 hours, and you'll see that there is the exact moment of conjunction at what do I got here on my label? I have at 12:38 p.m. GMT time, Mercury and Venus form an exact conjunction in the sign of Cancer. And the moon is still pretty close. It's still within that 3-degree range of engagement to a degree-based angle back to these planets. And remember, is the host of both now Mercury and Venus, and providing those scorpionic fallen lunar kinds of resources back to them as they try to express their nature. So Mercury wants to do something mercurial. It has to do so in this kind of lunary way. And it only has these scorpionic lunar things to work with. So very interesting, right? Now, one of the things that is also an indicator of how things might be interpreted is that look at the moon is also forming a square to Pluto. So there's this Plutonian connection here that makes it quite powerful, deep, maybe having to do with like the wealth or the riches of the underworld or something along those lines. But it's intense, right? It carries that very intense Plutonian kind of signature with it that is touching the moon, or the moon and Pluto are touching each other. And that's vibrating down the line to Mercury and Venus. We also have the moon beginning to move into an opposition with Mars. Now, I'll be honest with you, trying to synthesize these layers of complexity it's kind of too much for my mind. But what I do know is that Mars is the host ruler of the moon. They're moving into an opposition, which generally is a signature of tense kinds of things. And again, it brings forth that sort of message that says there's something potentially event-based. I don't usually like to go out on a limb and say that this concrete thing will happen, but in this particular sequence of events, I lean more in that direction this time. So I won't come and tell you exactly like, okay, it's exactly this, like you're going to end up marrying the mailman or something. Very concrete. But I do believe that this is pointing to something a little bit more tangible, especially since we're talking about, again, planets being guests in the moon's home. And in ancient astrology, the moon's home was the realm of the world, right? It was the tangible place that the soul would seek material, physical, incarnated experiences. So you see the setup here, very, very powerful. There's a tense opposition with the moon and Mars. There is a tense square with the moon and Scorpio, and the moon is informing Mercury and Venus that are getting married. What it really makes me think of is like an actual marriage. And you guys may know, if you've been watching the last couple of videos that I've been watching, I've completed it now, but I've been watching this Netflix series called Married at First Sight. I forget what season it is, but they have like tons of these seasons. But I love when it gets to the moment where these two people meet for the first time at the altar to get legally married. They've never met before, and they've had time to each write out their their vows. This reminds me of like a story where people would be at the altar, but the person marrying them and performing the religious ceremony is somehow this really intense kind of plutonic, Marsy, underworldly, scorpionic, dark, kind of intense person. It doesn't mean bad, but there's like there's like an intense minister that's really staring you down while you're getting married, and it's just like there's something really powerful and captivating about it. So it's sort of the image that I get with this. But just to round out the week, on Wednesday, the next sort of part of the story here, if we go forward, is we're going to see that the moon leaves the sign of Scorpio and moves into Sagittarius. Why is this important? Well, because the sign Sagittarius does not have visibility to Cancer. It's called an averse sign to Cancer. So in other words, the moon turns away. It gives you the interpretive meaning here, because as Mercury and Venus are coming together in a union, they're getting married. That whole time that happens, the moon is traveling through Scorpio, has visibility, and it's almost like looking after and paying attention to Mercury and Venus as they get married. But then as Mercury and Venus, as the wedding comes to an end, so to speak, the two planets begin to separate. The moon moves into a place. It's like going around the corner. It doesn't see them anymore. And it's almost like turning away. So what it does is it gives you the context that the like the fate of this marriage was meant to be about this this very lunary, scorpionic, depressed, fallen moon archetype. And when the union begins to separate, the moon says, okay, I'm done. My work is done here. And it sort of turns a blind eye. It goes into aversion. So the omen here is that gives you the way to interpret this Mercury-Venus conjunction. If the moon was somewhere else, it might be a totally different interpretation, but that's why it's so fascinating to me, at least. So hopefully I haven't bored you or taken too long to sort of draw this out. But when I was investigating and researching and trying to understand and put the puzzle pieces together in my mind about what could I say about Mercury and Venus moving into a conjunction, the fact that the conjunction took place as the moon was going through Scorpio, and then as the conjunction is ending and the moon goes into aversion, for me, that gives me the storyline to tell you guys. It's like something about this is very meant to go through that opposition with Mars, the ruler of the moon at the moment, the square with Pluto, and then later on the energies sort of become less intense, and it's sort of waning down after that. But that gives you the context of the storyline. I think that's how you interpret that, in my opinion. So, but just to round out the week here, on Thursday at 8:51 p.m. GMT time, we also get a very important moment in the solar year. We get the sun's entrance into the sign of Cancer, which is important because ancient astrologers looked at this moment as a powerful moment where the spirit enters into matter. Because the sun is obviously, it's the longest day of the year. It's the height or the zenith of the sun's power, but it's also simultaneously the moment that the sun's power begins to wane after that. And the movement is very specific and important here. The sun is climbing higher in the sky, and the summer solstice moment is the beginning of the descent of the sun back down. And that movement towards the earth signified that spirit was entering back into the earth. And what that means simply is that the soul seeks incarnation. If the soul wants to experience, it has to, it's like the rules of the game are that the soul needs to incarnate into the material realm. It needs to have worldly, tangible experiences. So that's where we derive a lot of interpretive meaning for the sign of Cancer itself, is that we're connected to materiality. We're connected to the Mother Earth. The I'm sure you guys have all heard how Cancers like to collect or hoard or hang on to things, or they almost are people that really hold on to trinkets or items of comfort or something like that. All of these Cancerian stereotypes are coming from the fact that there is this very deep connection with the material realm. And today there's kind of the trend or the fashion to like poo-poo that. You don't want to be being a materialist is considered like a negative, derogatory thing. But from the standpoint of the soul, there's no point to inhabit a body if you're not going to experience the worldly sublunary realm, right? There's no point to it. The very point of life is to go through all of the rich and wonderful experiences, be it experiences that are painful, ones we would wish to avoid, but also, of course, the ones that are joyful and grow our hearts in pleasure and warmth and love. All of those experiences, the soul doesn't seem to discriminate about what it wants to experience. The point here is that this is the moment and the place in the solar year that signifies that there is a deep connection with the tangible forms that are the way that the soul is capable of experiencing and growing as a soul. And it does that through inhabiting a physical body, but also being down here in a physical place with physical things. So it can attach to physical things or people or experiences in that way. So that is happening June 20. We get the summer solstice. And then if we go forward to Saturday, the last thing that we'll look at just timing wise here is that we get this full moon in Capricorn this week at the very end of the week here on Saturday or Friday. I guess it's Friday, Saturday, we get the full moon. And I wish I had time to talk about that because that's an incredibly important full moon for the year, but time dictates that we keep this a little bit briefer today. So let's now jump into the interpretive narratives for the sun, or for Mercury and Venus moving into this place where the sun descends. It climbs to its peak and then it descends. And while doing so, its host, the moon, is in this interesting condition of being depressed or fallen in the sign of Scorpio. So the first narrative that I think is going to be a broad narrative, an image that you could think of is like that the soul seeks a place. And of course, we sort of went into this a second ago here, but the hearing or writing of marriage vows. So let's think about this. We have Mercury, the god of messages, but he's also the god of hearing. He was also the god called the psychopomp that would guide the soul. And he's getting married to Venus, the love god. So right off the bat, very simple interpretation, something like love messages or love language, or you get that image again of like two people at the altar and they're reciting their vows or they're listening to the other person's vows. But that is the first thing, is that the soul seeks a place, a tangible place, and it wants to learn, it wants to hear, it wants to speak, it wants to also be connected to beauty, to pleasure, to relationship. It wants all of these experiences and it wants them tangibly. So now that could be a very, that you could experience that as kind of a more tangible materialistic way. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but we could very much see certain examples like wanting to begin a collection of something, or buying something that you find to be very beautiful and you're enamored by. You just want to have that. It could be something big, it could be something small, but the point is that finding a connection to material things, trinkets, valuables, resources, assets, that could be something that's really, really important. So you get Mercury and Venus coming together, and it's like maybe the exchange of money for something that you really want. But of course, that could work in the realm of relationships too, where you could have literal marriages, right? This is June after all. So, but I think the broader, higher understanding is that think of the soul seeking a material place. It wants to incarnate because it wants to experience things that are tangible, experiences that are tangible and worldly. And of course, those all involve relationships or speaking, writing, hearing of beautiful things. This represents spirit, the sun coming back down into matter, the earth, which signifies the soul's wish to incarnate into material form and attach to people, worldly experiences, and tangibles of this world, things like money, trinkets, etc. It also represents the soul's wish to reflect upon earthly experiences and has a deep connection with memory and childhood here in this sign. Having a conjunction between the goddess of love and the messenger god means we may get a love message, or may have a conversation that begins a new chapter in a relationship, or brings about a new relationship all on its own. Or this could mean the start of investing in some kind of collection, or the remembrance and flowing forth of ideas that connect you to your past, mother, sisters, brothers, family, childhood. A time of memoir writing also comes up for me, starting a journal, creative writing, etc. This is all ways in which the soul would seek a place to connect with the world. Now, let's get into the second way that is really important with this particular conjunction. Remember that the moon is in Scorpio while she is hosting this marriage between Mercury and Venus. What does that mean? Remember to include the darkness in the light as well. So on two levels. Again, planets are moving into this sign that has to do with the sun being at the zenith and then moving in time to a diminishment of solar power, meaning darkness enters the light half of the year. The days are getting shorter, and this represents the waning of solar power. So there is darkness that is entering back in, and that isn't bad, right? I know darkness as a term sounds negative, but that's exactly the point of number two, is that we can't all just live life on the sunny side, right? We can't. Life isn't just about rainbows and unicorns and just we're going to shy away from anything ugly or things we don't want to talk about. We want to stay away from them. That doesn't work. That's like utopia, and utopias always fail. Darkness, it needs a place at the table, and I think that could be a theme of this week, at least in part, with the moon in Scorpio informing this conjunction between Mercury and Venus. Is that, remember that it might be really healing to talk about those things that are darker or problematic, or it might be more what's the word? It advantageous to bring out the dirty laundry and say, this is the issue that I'm having with you, and go through it and purge some of those things that maybe are causing infection in the relationship or what have you. But the point here is that the soul doesn't only want nice, fluffy, lighthearted things. Now, Gemini, it's interesting, the sign that comes before Cancer, Gemini often ascribes to that exact kind of mentality. A lot of times it's lighthearted. It's like it walks on the surface of the water. It just ding ding ding. It doesn't usually want to get too deep. It loves the information. It loves the data. It loves the learning and the speech and the communication. But now we're in this watery lunar realm, and we're entering with incredibly deep, or it's like we're not just sticking a toe in, like it's like we fall down a massive, you know, bottomless well or something, and it's just massively deep with the moon square Pluto aspect and the Scorpio moon and so on and so forth. So there's like the need to include, potentially in a really big way, the darkness here. The darkness needs a home in the light too, as the moon is hosting this marriage between Mercury and Venus from Scorpio, the sign of her fall. The need might arise to dive below the surface and remember to include the darkness within the light. Life cannot be lived looking only at the nice sunny side. It has to include our fears, our problems, or dark forbidden desires, the death we experience, our aggressions, passions, battles, sacrifices that cause wounds or losses. This may be a time we reconnect and reflect or share with others these darker topics in order to strengthen the bonds between us and the bonds with our loved ones. Or it might be that a problem arises that requires a softened, gentle, nurturing hand. For instance, your plant falls off the deck, and now you're like, oh my gosh, I gotta, plants in their roots, you gotta be really careful. You gotta get the plant back into the pot. And there's this need for delicacy and gentleness and nurturing that comes in, but it happens due to something falling, right? Or your mom gets sick, or there's like a conflict at home that needs that gentleness with it. The direction you've been pushing in is facing an unlucky turn of events, or passions get the better of you and you take your anger out on someone and then have to send roses later on. So these are all different examples of like ways that you see that Scorpio moon representing problems, challenges, difficulties, something fallen, something hard on its luck, something going through a conflict, something representing the sickness or the issue that you're struggling with, something misfortunate that happens, like the plant falling off your deck or something. It can be little, it can be big. It doesn't have to be anything massive, but that's kind of what we're looking at here. Now, the other thing that I think is really a part of this, or could be, is that sometimes the soul needs to explore the darkness because certain elements are found there and only there that it wishes to experience. When you see planets like the psychopomp traveling through the gateway of man, as it was called, where spirit re-enters matter, we have to remember that Mercury was a psychopomp whose job was to guide the soul. So I wonder if we begin to feel the need to explore something in the depths, and sometimes even destructive things. It's like the soul beckons you to explore them, which is interesting because on the surface we know that that could be dangerous, and it is dangerous, right? But sometimes that's the food that the soul needs, and hopefully it doesn't go too far and get you into any real danger. But life is so mysterious, and it feels to me as though there is value for the soul in sometimes moving into those spaces to experience something that can't be found in the other places, right? So I wouldn't encourage anybody, of course, to be destructive, but the soul is immortal, first of all, right? If you believe that, I do. So it can't be harmed. And maybe that's one reason why sometimes it likes to go into those dangerous, forbidden, dark spaces, because there's food there that it's like a grocery store for the soul, that it's like that's the only place you get that, right? If you wonder why something is the way it is, if you know somebody and you're like, I wonder why they are like that, why don't they just like not do that? That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Well, maybe the reason is because they're very curious about that darkness. And I don't think that that is bad on the surface, because at the end of the day, I truly believe the soul is immortal and cannot be harmed. Of course, each one of us has to believe what feels right for us, but that is, I think, a part of the narrative here with this conjunction. Now, this isn't the longest lasting, conjunction in the world. And though Mercury and Venus are in Cancer for a little bit of time, and the moon moves into all these different signs and will provide Mercury and Venus after the conjunction with other resources based on its condition in other signs, we get a quick experience of this week. But I will say this. Remember that, actually, let me pull up the real-time clock. Remember that another interesting thing about what is happening with Venus and Mercury is Mercury and Venus are both further in the zodiac than the sun is, meaning that they are both evening stars and they're still really close to the sun. So both Mercury and Venus are working on moving out of invisibility back into the visible realm and becoming stars again. It's like they've gone through this whole death and rebirth process. They finally come together, but they're still in the invisible underworldly realm, meaning you can't see Mercury and Venus in the night sky just after sunset, or in the morning sky just before sunrise. But eventually, as time goes on, Mercury, by the time Mercury gets to the end of Cancer, Mercury will reappear and be visible in the nights, in the early evening sky. And then Venus will move into Leo a little bit after that and herself become visible in the early evening sky. So a lot to put into this interpretation, but the whole part of this synodic cycle with invisibility between these two planets is also speaking to this very deep, dark place that they're working in coming out of. So Mercury might be that guide that is guiding the soul through the wilderness, through the dark forest or the underworldly realm, in order to bring the soul in contact with underworldly treasures, as it were. So I'll leave it at that. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Please tell me in the comments what you liked about this, or if hopefully I'm making sense. And anything that you notice yourself with this, I would love to hear what you guys noticed this week with this particular action that is happening for us. I'll be back again next Monday with another Mantic Monday video. Until then, have a great week, you guys, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.